Welcome to the Football Insiders. Jason Andera, Midco Sports. Michael McCleary, Argus Leader Media. Michael, you are the new high school reporter at the Argus Leader. Everybody wants to know all about you. And tell us a little bit about where you're from and how long you've been here at the Argus.
Yeah, I'm from New York. Born and raised there. Went to school in Syracuse, so went from downstate New York to upstate New York for college.
Perfect.
And the last year I was at the Indianapolis Star, and I spent about 2 months home before getting the job out here and moving out here and starting a new life in Sioux Falls.
So you went from the Indianapolis Star to the Argus, while my cohort last year, Brian Henshin, made the opposite move. And Brian, we do miss you, but Hank 2.0 is going to be just fine.
Yeah, so. It was a sign and trade. There was some cash involved.
We do miss Brian, but we are going to move on by previewing this week of high school football. Week 2, we call it, because week 1 was last week. And what game were you at, and what were your impressions of last week?
I was at DeSmet Wolsey-Wessington. Really good 9-man game. It was my first impression of 9-man football maybe ever.
Yeah, there's not much 9-man football across the country.
I might have driven past it at some point in my life, but it was really interesting, especially on the big field in Brookings. There was a lot of scoring, some really nice plays, some that got some national attention, and it was a game that I was really looking forward to because I'd heard about Wolsey-Wessington prior to coming here, and DeSmet actually sort of surprised me in that regard because I expected Wolsey to be such a strong team coming in. DeSmet kind of came out of the gate and kind of destroyed them for a little bit.
Yeah, Wolsey moved from 9B as the champions up to 9A, so a little bit different competition for them. Not much, but everybody had them pegged as the number 1 team and DeSmet as the 2, but that flipped after last week, and I was at that game as well, and I was really impressed with how strong DeSmet was. I think a much stronger team than they were last year. They had kind of the same core of players that were giving them plays, but Kalen Gary, that guy, he cramped up in the second half, but he made some ridiculous catches.
Yeah, I mean, he was a playmaker. Yeah. And, after the game, head coach Brennan Pitts told me that they got a lot of playmakers on that team.
They do.
But, Kalen really did seem like, the guy for that offense. They used him in so many different ways. They had him go deep. They had him run short routes and just kind of beat the defense with his feet in open space. He was really fun to watch, and had great hands and great feet, and it was almost unfortunate to see him go down because I was really enjoying watching him play.
Yeah, people across South Dakota know Kalen Gary, of course, is the Player of the Year in Class B basketball over the last 2 seasons, getting ready for his senior year, but he can definitely ball on the football field as well. The rest of week 1, we saw some interesting battles. Platte Geddes played against Canastota in Class 9AA. That was a battle of 2 teams that were 1-2 in the polls, and Platte Geddes snuck that one out. Did you have any involvement with that game at all?
Not really. Obviously I was following along with a lot of the top teams in each class, and there was a decent amount of movement in certain sections of the state.
Yeah, definitely. So that one, Platte Geddes ended up winning. It was closer than I thought. I thought Canastota Freeman came into the year, they only had like 2 starters back. I thought maybe they would take a little bit more to get started, but they played right with Platte Geddes. Another big game last week was between Sioux Valley and Bridgewater Emory-Ethan in 11B, 2 ranked teams that squared off, and it was close. Sioux Valley had the lead for a while, but Bridgewater Emory-Ethan, they came back strong and they ran the ball like we knew they would. So a couple of the big games from week 1, and we're just getting our feet under us. But let's move on to talking about this upcoming week, because now, instead of just the smaller classes, we've got everybody playing. And let's start at an 11 AAA. You've had a chance to talk to a lot of the coaches in 11 AAA, especially the Metro coaches. First of all, what's some overall impressions of the biggest class in South Dakota?
Well, Jefferson really, makes things a lot different this year.
Yeah.
And, obviously this is my first experience with it, but, the general message from pretty much every coach that I talk to is this is going to change the landscape a lot. Mm-hmm. A lot of players moving around, even coaches moving around.
Yeah.
We don't know what this is going to do to the balance because a lot of these teams sort of have similar structures to what they've had in last year. Obviously, Roosevelt lost 2 quarterbacks, but they still have one of the best, maybe the best offensive line in the state.
They do.
A bunch of huge guys on the line, and that's something Roosevelt's been known for over the past couple of years. So, maybe this doesn't really have an effect and it just makes the football more entertaining. But at the same time, a lot of coaches are keeping an eye on that and just kind of seeing what having another team in the mix does to the landscape.
I think it balances things out. I really do, especially in the Sioux Falls schools. You just have that many more players with an opportunity to play football, which is huge, I think, because you had, for a while there, you know, to start at Roosevelt, you had to be a college-level football player to be able to play in high school. So now I think it just spreads it out a little bit more. But really, the first place votes in the first poll of the year, it came down to Harrisburg and Brandon Valley, two non-Sioux Falls teams getting all those first place votes. What should we expect from the Tigers and the Lynx?
Yeah, well, obviously the Lynx are coming off a state championship season. You know, it's hard to bet against them, and, you know, especially the people that they have up on their line. You know, they have a way of being a good team come the season.
They've built a culture, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, obviously being without their coach this season, you know, they got an interim head coach this year who, you know, is extremely excited, and, you know, obviously a lot of their players are excited to be playing for Coach Christensen as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, the Lynx are going to be a contender pretty early on, and I'm sure they'll get better over the course of the season as they start to figure a few things out. And you know, Harrisburg has maybe the best player in the state in Jacob Knuth. So
yeah, you know, for those of you who haven't seen the new insert, Jacob Knuth headlining for you guys.
Yeah, he's the lead story in our Argus Sports high school football insert. So pick that up in your Thursday paper. It's going to be on the inside. It's a lot of good reads, a lot of good previews, some schedules to check out, and yeah, so there's our little promotion there.
Plug that. It's done. It's really done well. I like the way you guys do media day, get the kids involved, and then the write-ups and all the teams.
Yeah, the best thing is the photos and you know how much fun the kids have with that. OGorman had maybe the best time with it. They had a little rowboat photo, and that, you know, is definitely in the guide, and you could see it online as well. So, you know, it's fun to relive that. That was a fun day.
Yeah. So we just talked about it. Harrisburg, Brandon Valley sitting at the top. The Sioux Falls teams, I think, all have some type of a claim on having a good season this year. We'll see how that all emerges. But let's get into the previews for this week. Let's talk about some of the biggest games, and we'll start in 11 AAA, where the game that we have on Midco this week, Jefferson's first ever game, so the newest school ever in Sioux Falls, taking on the oldest school in Sioux Falls with the most history, 42 titles in their school history, 6 of them since we had the common era, I guess, since 1981. But two different teams from two different backgrounds, but the cultures are similar because you got a lot of crossover with Chad Statham being the athletic director at Jefferson, and he's, you know, brought some Warrior guys over there too. But I don't know, impressions of what you might see in a Washington-Jefferson game this week, Michael?
Yeah, this is a really interesting game because obviously everybody's looking to see how Jefferson's going to be in their first season. Yeah. They got a really good quarterback, and they got some solid players coming over from Roosevelt, as well as other teams sort of within their general area.
Yeah.
So
I think they've got kids from like 5 different. They've got Lincoln kids, they got West Central kids, Tri-Valley kids, Roosevelt kids mostly, but they're all over.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix, and in that sense, a lot of the early message, you could even see the mob on their helmet, "Make others better." Yep. You know, a lot of their early messages sort of coming together. You know, almost that just, you know, these kids have been playing against each other for so long. Now they need to play together as a team.
Yep.
So I think everybody's really interested in seeing how they are. But Washington is a team that really interests me because they might have one of the best defensive end duos in the state in Abraham Myers and Kenneth Ledbetter. Like they really, really are going to get after the quarterback this year, and that's going to make Talon Ashley's job for Jefferson really difficult, especially playing in front of behind actually a pretty inexperienced offensive line. So yeah, I mean this might be a defensive battle early on, at least, you know, as Jefferson starts to figure themselves out and Washington plays to their strengths. But you know, I think Washington can be a surprise team. Obviously, Ryan Evans is a relatively new coach within the Sioux Falls area, so you know, I think this could be a year that, you know, he leads his team to the playoffs and maybe makes some noise.
It's really interesting because the first poll of the year, nobody knows exactly what to expect. But there's a lot of respect out there for Jefferson. They made the top 5. Washington did not. That's not how I voted. But I just want to say, The Washington Warriors know about that. They heard about that a little bit, and that's going to light a little bit of a fire. Jefferson, let's give them credit. I think their defense is going to be better than people think. They've got a lot of good players. I think Coach Whiting will do a fantastic job getting those guys ready. They have maybe the two best receivers, at least the best duo in the state, in Robert Hutchinson and Griffin Wilde. He already has offers from SDSU and USD just as a junior. So a pair of junior receivers to go with Talon Ashley. If they can get the ball out quick, they're going to make big plays. Can they stop Washington? Because Washington's got, like you said, the defensive ends, I think, are going to explode this year. I think they're looking at ways to make their defensive ends more explosive than they were more run stoppers last year. I think Washington's going to be very interesting with Max Thompson back at quarterback. He looks, I saw him in practice yesterday, he looks bigger and more athletic than I remember Max Thompson being. So it's going to be a really interesting way to start this season. Really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, and he could throw the ball a mile too. And
yeah, he can.
One of the things he talked about earlier, in the practice schedule, was trying to maybe not trust that arm as much. Not go for the big plays always, not try to win games with his arm. Kind of dink and dunk a little bit and just play within the offense a little. So with that, obviously he's got an incredible arm talent. With that, I really think that that's a really good mindset moving forward, especially with as strong of a defense they're going to have and so much experience they have on their roster. I really think they're a team that slept on.
Biggest difference, I think, Washington has 5 returning offensive linemen and some really good ones, some really good tackles, and Aiden Brink, who started for 4 years right in the middle of that line. So advantage Washington for me in that game, but we're going to be calling that one, so we'll see how it plays out. The number 1 team in the class, Harrisburg Tigers, they draw the number 1 team in 11AA, the 4-time defending champs from Pierre. In case you don't have background, they've been pretty good over the last half decade. But this year, they maybe have the least experienced team that Pierre has ever had. And meanwhile, you've got maybe the most experienced team Harrisburg's ever had, and definitely the most depth. I was out at practice one day when they had 9th through 12th graders out. There's over 120 kids out at Harrisburg. That is huge numbers for this Tiger team. Talk a little more about these Tigers with Jacob Knuth leading the way.
Yeah, Jacob Knuth, it's hard to bet against that kid. He's probably the most quarterback-looking person that I've ever seen. And he just looks the part. He can throw the ball really well. He's really athletic. He's already on his way to Minnesota, right before his senior year. So, he's here to win a state championship. Harrisburg's here to win a state championship. Obviously, they come really close in the past couple of years, really, really close last year. That's really... It's state championship or bust for them, and that's a quote from them. So, I really think this will be an interesting game because, obviously Pierre is coming in, being such a powerhouse in 11AA. So this can really either show, how Pierre is going to recover from, losing so many guys last year, or it's going to show just how good Harrisburg is early on. It's going to set the tone for, how the both 11 AAA and AA classes are going to go pretty early in the season because Harrisburg comes out and just blows out Pierre. Harrisburg's going to be a problem this year.
And it could happen. Pierre had a little drama in the offseason where Lincoln Keenholtz and his family, the quarterback at Pierre, they were planning to move to Arizona. It fell through at the last minute, so he stays and comes back as maybe the most talented player in 11AA. That's going to be huge for Pierre, but they only have about 2-3 starters who have experience on that team, and they're going to have to rely on that junior class to really step up this year. And I think the best, most underrated part of this Pierre team over the last couple of years were their big guys on the defensive line. Not as big a guys to stop the run up the middle. So I think Pierre's going to take a couple of weeks before they head down into October, where I think they're going to be playing their best ball. It's going to be tough right off the top for these Governors, though. Harrisburg, we talked about Knuth, but his weapons are tremendous. Gavin Ross, the junior running back, is really tough to tackle. I can't wait to see their receivers because Lincoln Carlson made some outstanding plays last year. He's back. He's going to be a deep threat for them. And Andrew Walter, one of the best possession receivers in the state. And then you add in a sophomore who's really looked good in Triton Tyon. This guy is a guy who's going to be a star in this state. And he may have a chance to make some big plays right away. So Harrisburg loaded all across the field. I think that's a tough draw for Pierre right off the bat. The number 2 team in 11 AAA, Brandon Valley, they take on Stevens. So a little bit different. Stevens is a team that had a new coach last year. They're just moving up. We talked a little bit about Brandon Valley. You got a chance to talk to a couple guys, including Brady Copel, their center who's going to USD. Just tell me any impressions that you have of Brandon Valley.
Yeah, well, it starts with the offensive line, and you mentioned Brady Copel. He's a big guy, and they got a lot of big guys on that line. So they're going to run the ball well. They're going to throw well. They got a pretty solid foundation on their offense, and on the defensive side, it's hard to bet against them there as well.
Yeah, they've got leaders in each level, and that's important with Noah Thompson and some of those guys that they bring back, and Owen Warren and these guys who really set the tone for them.
Yeah, you could really tell just from basically talking to them, over the course of media day that they were maybe the most poised team that I talked to in terms of guys who just came. There was a lot of talk about leadership, but the people who came from Brandon Valley, they looked like leaders, and there were a lot of people who looked like leaders that day. But it was pretty fascinating that there wasn't a guy that I doubted.
Yeah.
Could lead a team or maybe was out of his comfort zone. They got a lot of people who have a lot of conviction in what they say, I think that's going to pay dividends, especially coming off a state championship season.
Yeah, if you're wondering who's going to replace Joe Colbeck, Tate Johnson, and Jackson Hilton, we're looking at Lucas Slack, a junior quarterback who played a few games last year, and he looks really good and comfortable at the quarterback position. Jordan Johnson at running back. He moved from playing defensive line to being their lead running back this year. So this will be interesting to see how they use that offense. But he can break tackles and is very good. And Peyton Carroll, he played a big role last year as a receiver, and he's kind of the main guy with Sam Skolton on the outside this year. So I think they'll be just fine in those skill positions. So let's look at Brandon Valley. Number 3 team in 11 AAA, we've got Roosevelt, and they play at the Dakota Bowl, first game of the year. Usually Dakota Bowl's 2 or 3 weeks in, but you've got Roosevelt, OGorman, 2 West Side teams, always have good matchups. That one should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we were both at the Dakota Bowl press day the other day. It seems like both of these teams are tempering expectations, at least early on.
I agree.
Roosevelt's got a new quarterback. So does OGorman, but OGorman, took Roosevelt's old quarterback, so I think they're a little bit more confident about. I think they're a little bit more confident in that the guy behind center there. But there's a lot of uncertainty with both of these teams. OGorman, always talks about how their line is a little bit smaller, and they're comparing it to Roosevelt's offensive line, which is enormous.
That's exactly right.
So that's one of the things that they're worried about early on. And Roosevelt got a lot taken away from them by Jefferson. Receivers, quarterback,
But they were mostly juniors and sophomores that they got taken away from them. So they still have a lot of seniors, right?
Yes, they still have a ton of seniors, and Roosevelt is good pretty much every single year.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to bet against them, especially in this game when OGorman only has 5 starters returning on both sides of the ball. But, it's very funny to hear both the coaches talk about, how they expect at least the early season to go, because they both got really tough schedules early on, and maybe they're not in the position that they would have, hoped for, I guess, this time last season.
But they're both well coached, as you said. Jason Poppinga always has his best team playing late in the year. Kim Nelson, I think he kind of likes that underdog role a little bit more. The last few years they've been projected right at the top to start the year, and then just barely not made those goals. So I think he likes being the underdog to be able to come up. This is the second year in a row that Roosevelt has had 2 sophomores competing for their starting quarterback. That doesn't usually happen where you have sophomores competing 2 years in a row. Of course, Taylon Ashley won that job last year, went to Jefferson. Bennett Dannenbring, who was the backup, went to OGorman, is going to be their starting quarterback. This year, 2 new sophomores take over, and it's Jackson Brower, an athletic quarterback who gets that job. But I would be surprised if they do a lot of passing right away with Jackson Brower. Their strength is their running backs with Tyree Nave and their offensive line that can just people move. So I think they're going to run it more than they usually do.
Yeah, and Kim Nelson, head coach of Roosevelt, spoke about it as well. He thought that running was maybe going to be a bigger part of the playbook.
Not his favorite thing, but
it's not his favorite thing, and he emphasized that many times. that he wants to be able to throw the ball, and the hope with the quarterback by the end of the season is that they become not only good athletes but good quarterbacks. So he wants to throw the ball, but at this point of the season, playbook's going to be a little bit smaller, and it's going to be a lot of single reads when it comes to passing plays. So that's the thing he's going to emphasize early. Utilize Jackson's athleticism, and he's hoping that the run game can get going because in previous seasons he said that maybe it should have been going a little bit more. Yeah. Where when opposing defenses start to catch up to the pass game, he didn't really have that running option to turn to in previous seasons. And so with Tyree Nave back there and a really good offensive line, as well as Brower, being able to get out of the pocket as well. They got a ton of athletes, and it's almost inexcusable if they don't get the running game going.
I agree. I just know how stubborn Kim Nelson is, and he'll admit it too, that he really wants balance, and really, I think they've got guys who can make plays too. I think Matt Gehring's a guy you're going to hear his name a little bit more this year. He was a linebacker for him last year, but I think he's going to be one of their guys at receiver this year that makes a little bit of an impact too. So we'll see how that progresses. 11 AA, I think the biggest game of the week. Pierre's the number one team, of course, playing number one in 11 AAA, but you got an interesting battle between Brookings and T Area. So T Area moves up from 11A to 11 AA. That's got to be interesting, first of all, just to play an upper level competition coming off of a championship.
Yeah, and this is probably a really good game to kind of see where they stand, at least this season. I don't think they're necessarily going down anytime soon, even if this season isn't the best for them. Mm-hmm. So they got a couple years to kind of figure out what this new and bigger schedule is going to do for them. But yeah, I mean, if T Area comes out and really plays well in AA, that's a really interesting storyline to follow across the season, especially. Can you imagine if they win the state tournament
I know.
this year?
I thought about that. They're one of the smaller teams in AA this year, and they've been one of the bigger teams in 11A as they've really risen to prominence over the last few years. So a different role for them. And honestly, this is not one of the best T area teams even over the last 3 years. But I still think with Craig Clayburgh, they are going to be a competitive team. They've got some competitors. This Brookings team, same thing. I think there's reasons to be excited about them, and there's also reasons to be tempered about them. Last year, they really came onto the scene with Josh Burrai running the football for them. They won't have that this year, but I think they got a lot of depth, and I think what Brady Clark is doing at Brookings is really moving them in the right direction. But don't expect them to get to a third straight championship game. They might, but I wouldn't expect that because I think 11 AA is so wide open this year. I don't know if that's your first impression on 11 AA or not, but I think there's a lot of teams where last year it really felt like Pierre and Brookings were the only teams.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely don't expect T Area to come out and win the state championship this year.
I get that. I got it.
But it would just.
But they could, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what a storyline if they did.
So they're right in the mix. Watertown and Aberdeen moved down to 11 AA. I think both of those two teams have a chance to do something. I think Yankton's got the best football team they've had in several years. They started out last season undefeated before losing to Brookings, and I think they come back and they could be the favorites in this class by the time this is all said and done. And there's just a lot more contenders, which makes just for a lot more fun in 11 AA.
Absolutely.
11A's biggest game, can't get bigger than 1 versus 2. Del Rapids taking on Canton. Canton has made it to the championship game 2 years in a row. Won it 2 years ago, lost it last year, come back this year with a lot. Del Rapids, on the other hand, has had some early playoff exits, have had some really good teams. I think they really like what they have in their running back, Landon Rusink. And when you got a quarterback who's going to be a D1 pitcher, I think they like what they have there as well. So I think that's a game really to look forward to. Any other games that you really have on the radar here, Michael, that we want to make sure we touch on? Don't mean to put you on the spot, but if there's anything else, let me know.
Yeah, nothing that stands out right now.
Okay, so that's through 11A. Just a quick reminder on the schedule. Sioux Valley takes on Woonsocket, Wessington Springs, Sanborn Central, another ranked battle. Bridgewater, Emory, Ethan, and Winter, number 1 versus number 2 in 11B. That's always a huge game. Bridgewater, what a schedule for them. They played last week against Sioux Valley and grinded it out. This week they have to go to Winter, a team that's been in the championship game with them over the last couple of seasons. Some other interesting games. Huron takes on Yankton. Bonham and Chester, I think, will be a lot of fun. West Central plays Lennox. Howard, Coleman, Egan. Harding County and Wall, a couple West River teams that play each other in 9-man football that could be contenders. So a nice field to look at. But let's hear specifically about what you're covering coming up this weekend, Michael.
Yes, so I'm going to be out at Roosevelt and OGorman for the Dakota Bowl on Saturday. And Friday, I'll be out at
Jefferson and Washington?
Jefferson and Washington.
Okay. And then you said that Matt Zimmer will be covering a game as well, I believe.
Yep. He's going to be out in Pierre covering the Harrisburg game as well. Okay. So yeah, we got 3 games this weekend. We're really looking forward to the coverage.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. On Midco, you can tune in and watch Jefferson against Washington. Of course, there's a lot of choices out there to watch streams of games. We put a lot of effort into it, and you can stream us now on Midco Sports Plus, as well as if you get us on cable. So don't have to have cable to watch that. And then we'll have Dakota Bowl as well with Roosevelt and OGorman. Michael, it's been a lot of fun. How did it hit for you here this first show?
It was stressful at the start, but once we got talking, I was pretty comfortable.
I think this guy's going to be just fine. Make sure you say hi to him when you're out at the games. Make him feel welcome and make him feel good for covering high school football. We love having you in South Dakota.
Awesome.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.